This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun beating Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
A busy day if you follow Big League Baseball, and a couple of Gamecocks right in the mix as the trade deadline hit last night at 6 o'clock across Major League Baseball. Welcome in at 8 o'clock. Live video stream up and rolling. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Audio stream going on Podbean this morning. Hope your Wednesday morning's going well. August 3rd, 2022, last Wednesday without Gamecock football officially being in action, without all college football programs across the country officially being underway. We're going to talk to our buddy Scott Eisberg down in Charleston. I think he right now is at the Citadel's football practice with the TV camera doing his real job there. So we'll get some on the boots on the ground eyewitness accounts of college football this morning, but still a couple of days away from South Carolina camp specifically kicking off. But I know we've got college football across the country either starting here in the last few days or about to start in the next few days. A great sign. You got NFL camps going as well. And a great example of why I will never be a recruiting guy starts us this morning. And we'll get into the trade details, especially as it pertains to the Gamecocks. Big NFL news yesterday as well. A legend leaves us in sports. The legend of sports broadcasting leaves us as well. So we'll get into all of that. The most South Carolina story of all time I read yesterday. But we'll start with this. Sub to 16 now, I think. Class of 2023 for Gamecock football, because part of the flurry of activity over the weekend for the class of 2024 DB from Ohio, it was an offensive lineman, Batavius Shivers from Georgia, but the big two four-star in-state guys, another offensive lineman, and Marquis Anderson, I should say another one. He was the headliner, right? Highest rated guy in the class, second highest rated offensive lineman in the history of modern recruiting for the Gamecocks, only behind Brandon Shell. And with Monteque Rames, a four-star defensive end from Sumter, that was all over the weekend. And then there was another footnote as well to keep track of. That was a Florida defensive back, thought to be a three-star guy, in Cameron Upshaw Jr., who had decommitted to Carolina, and that lasted all of 4 days now? Because not even that, right? I guess yesterday, recommitting to the class of 2023. This happens, right? We're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-old who are having so much stuff being thrown at them. And no idea the details here. I haven't even seen it speculated about what it might be. But that's the latest wrinkle for Gamecock football recruiting as I check the on-3 consensus team rankings, where South Carolina sits at 22, where they were even before the recommitment. And according to this ranking, exactly half splits it up, the class of 16 evenly. 8 4-star guys, 8 3-star guys. I would say, as far as Gamecock recruiting classes go, 50-50. 4-star guys, you got half of them as 4-stars. That's about as good as we've seen in a while. Let's go to comparison. So Arkansas is 6 spots ahead of Carolina. They got 23 guys in their class. They've got 10 of those 23 as 4-star guys, according, again, to this on3.com consensus rankings. Tennessee's got 19 guys in the fold. They've got 7 of the 19 4-stars or higher. They've got 1 5-star guy. So 12 of their 19 are considered 3-star guys. Florida is right behind Tennessee at number 13 in the country, according to this ranking. Again, on3.com. They got 12 of their 16 guys as 4-star guys. They've been really making a push lately for sure. Interesting to see some of these breakdowns. Baylor's got 23 guys committed, and they're ranked just 1 spot ahead of Carolina, 21st in the country, but just 5 of their 23 guys are 4-star guys. 18 of 23 guys are 3 stars. North Carolina is right behind South Carolina with 15 guys committed. 10 of those 15 are 3-star guys. So just interesting to see it all break down, to see it all come together for sure. The higher up the list you go, the higher percentage you have leaning towards the 4 stars and above for some of these programs. Like right now, Alabama's got 4 5-star guys, 10 4-stars, and only 4 3-star guys. That's why they're number 1 in the country. Notre Dame is number 2 in the country. 18 of their 20 commits are 4-star guys. They got 1 5-star guy or 1 3-star guy. And if this hurts your head, I'm with you. Overrated, the star system, flawed, no doubt, but it's the best we got. Kind of like politics these days in our country. It's the best we got. It's the ultimate conclusion I come to, and I try not to complain about it too much, but inevitably I complain. Hey, thank you guys for hopping on, being a part of the show. DC in first. Anthony up next with the Good Morning UFAs, and Jason says good morning. Tim, always great to see you. Good to see you as well, sir. What'd you think of all the activity in Major League Baseball yesterday? That's about as busy of a trading deadline day as I can remember. Maybe it was because of the direct impact for Gamecock guys. Kansas City Royals trading Whit Merrifield to the Toronto Blue Jays. Hurt me to read. You guys want to guess how old Whit Merrifield is now? You want to feel real old? Never forget watching him as a freshman. Gamecock baseball, out in the outfield, already in the lineup. And hey, this guy's a solid player. Be interesting to follow his career. And now here he is as a 33-year-old. After being a guy who's led the league in hitting and hits a couple of times, stolen bases several times, led the American League with stolen bases 3 times, led the American League with 42 doubles last year, just hitting 240 this year, and traded the Toronto Blue Jays yesterday. Blue Jays are in good shape for a postseason spot, 4 games clear in the wild card, the top wild card spot in the American League. And it will be really interesting to follow the Whit Merrifield situation from that standpoint, because he recently, I think, rankled some feathers there around Kansas City, the Royals organization. He's one of 10 guys on that Royals team, I guess, who chose not to get vaccinated. I can identify with that. But his comment was, I guess, the only way that he said he would get vaccinated is if he would have to have it to go play in Canada and be on a team that had a chance in the postseason, I think was the gist, at least what I've read, the gist of his comments that might have rubbed Royals fans the wrong way, and now it appears that that's exactly what happened. So Whit Merrifield, going from the Royals, where the organization that he fought his way through, it took him a lot of years. I mean, that's why you're seeing 33 years old. I think it took him at least 5 years to get through that minor league system to finally get the call up to the big leagues, where he has already had just passed the 1,000 career hit threshold. Led the league in total hits a couple of years. Led the league in stolen bases 3 years. Last year led the league in doubles. Now is headed to the Toronto Blue Jays. I know a lot of Gamecock fans pulling for Whit Merrifield for sure. We've seen former Gamecock, play for the Blue Jays, with Justin Smoke being the notable one. Mentioned our buddy Scott Eisberg going to join us in a little bit. He's buddies with Justin Smoke down there in Charleston, and he just got back from a vacation up in Canada, by the way. So plenty of connections to talk to Scotty about, as it always works with Scott. Saw Jordan Montgomery help Sumter High School win a state championship back in the day. Jordan Montgomery, rough day for him yesterday. Visibly kind of upset or shaken might be the better word after being traded from the organization that drafted him, and he came up through the minor leagues as well in the New York Yankees. Jordan Montgomery, now a St. Louis Cardinal, traded for center fielder Harrison Bader, where the Yankees really value his defense, I think, especially moving forward. They're trying to set up the roster for October. Montgomery been a really steady starter, but never necessarily one of their frontline guys. And ironically, the fact that they have Clark Schmidt, another former Gamecock at AAA, as a bit of a security blanket for projected starter moving forward and kind of filling that spot, that probably helped the Yankees make this move. You know, your college baseball program is pretty solid when you got multiple guys in the mix on Major League Baseball's trading deadline, but especially in one organization, and an organization like the Yankees, from a starting pitcher standpoint. Montgomery been solid this year as well, more than solid, 3.69 ERA, 21 starts. His comment was he feels like he's been really consistent in his career, but still never played his best baseball for the Yankees. So now we'll have maybe a little extra incentive to show the baseball world what he can do, and moving over to the National League and another tremendous organization. I mean, if I had to pick, this is probably what I would pick. Like maybe the Dodgers, the National League over the Cardinals, but from a consistency standpoint, an organization with history and a passionate fan base, I'd probably put the Cardinals at the top in the National League, certainly the Yankees at the top in the American League, and now Jordan Montgomery gets to see it from the inside looking up. Yeah, August 3rd, Hope, thanks for the reminder. 1 month from today, September 3rd, we kick off the college football season. Thanks for popping in the YouTube live stream and contributing to the program however you want to. The big trade in Major League Baseball yesterday, and we certainly won't just talk about big league baseball the entire show, but needed to start with this, especially with former Gamecocks being involved. Big trade in baseball at large was Juan Soto going to the San Diego Padres. Not too long ago, turned down a 15-year, $440 million deal. Is that? It's so ridiculous. I have to make sure that I read it when I say it. He's 23 years old. Will be a free agent after the 2024 season. So he's got 3 more seasons. That's how the Padres are looking at this thing. They've got 3 more seasons, or 2.5, to figure out how they might be able to keep him. You add him to a lineup with Fernando Tatis Jr., who has known Juan Soto for a long time, both being from the Dominican Republic. Manny Machado. Ooh. Impressive power move from the San Diego Padres yesterday, basically giving up a handful, 5 prospects, to the Washington Nationals. To give the Washington Nationals some credit as well, once they made a strong offer, man. 15 years, $440 million, making him a career national. You don't want that. All right, we need to move on. Unfortunately, from the Nationals standpoint, if you're a fan of them, my sister lives up that way. Her kids, fans of the Nationals. Got to go through the World Series run a couple of years ago. Back to the run. Harper, he's gone. Max Scherzer, he's gone. So my kids now are the owners of hand-me-down jerseys of Scherzer and Harper, I think, from Washington Nationals, the old ones. And now some old Juan Soto jerseys, I'm guessing, on clearance. Sporting goods stores around the country, or certainly around the D.C. area. those guys just been shipped out, and the entire Nationals franchise. I mean, massive players, not able to hold on to them. Kind of the exact opposite of where the Braves sit today after the Austin Riley deal a couple of days ago for 10 years, $212 million, having Riley, Cunha, the Albies, Matt Olson, all wrapped up for the foreseeable future. I think Dean Anderson's in there, and kind of go down the list. I know he struggled this year, but the Braves did not struggle yesterday. Pounding the Phillies 13-1. I think the final score 2.5 games back of the Mets since June 1st. Major League Baseball best record of 40-14. And they went through the trade deadline aggressively yesterday. Mentioned it on the program, so it wasn't just yesterday that they made these moves. Added an outfielder in Robbie Grossman from the Detroit Tigers, kind of just to get some depth in there, maybe a platoon spot. Added a starting pitcher, Jake Odorizzi, I believe is how you pronounce his name, from the Astros. And then went out yesterday and got a closer, guy who'd been doing it for the Reds for several years this year, doing it for the Angels, and Raisel Iglesias. 34 saves last year, tied his career high, 16 saves this year. So you add him, got rid of Will Smith, who was struggling. Thank you for the World Series run. Couldn't have happened without you, but time to move on. So I think Braves fans should be very pleased, especially with how it looked at the end of May. And since then, man, 2 months can drastically change the field of even the organization, right? I get it, coming off the World Series championship, but to not be a factor early on and to have most of the same guys, minus Freddie Freeman, and how that went down. And then now in the last couple of months, to hear more about that whole situation and how that went down, and to see Freddie Freeman looking for other representation or having a fluid situation there. That was great. But then to wrap up a guy who has just gone bonkers at the plate here recently in Austin Riley, to wrap him up for the foreseeable future, the next decade, and to have the Major League Baseball best record of 40-14, man, great. You can't feel much better. Yeah, what kind of money do the Padres have to pay all three of those guys? Great question. And you got to get close to $1 billion, I'm guessing. Machado not quite as young, so not as many years going to be left on a big deal. But how about the San Diego Padres making moves in the big league? Good for them. From my memory, my standpoint, the big move that I remember the Padres being a part of was sending Fred McGriff to the Braves. I think it was the Blue Jays and then the Padres, and then coming over to the Braves. I believe is how it went for Fred McGriff. And then it was always Mr. Padre, Tony Gwynn for me. And my kids were looking at my baseball cards yesterday and found what Tony Gwynn rookie is one of my better cards. They're excited about looking up some of those. Paul Molitor and Alan Trammell combo rookie cards, I think. That'd be the best one that I have in the old collection that I've given to them, and I've mostly given to them, except for some of those big-time cards that I don't trust. They're all over that. Troy's a Reds fan. Troy, a resident Clemson fan, being a Reds. The fact that you're a Reds fan really has my respect. I mean, knowing that it started happening back in the Big Red Machine days, less respect, especially then, right? Hop on the bandwagon, the winner, but to remain a Reds fan from the state of South Carolina, from there, trade deadlines like tax day to me. Anthony, same way, being a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. Yeah. But I hope the Padres give you guys some reason for optimism. Because the Padres, for a lot of years, man, really irrelevant. They've had a couple of pockets here or there. What was it, Jim Leyritz back in the day? against the Braves, I think. But I don't think if you're going through some kind of power rankings in the National League that you consider the Padres in the last couple of decades anywhere close to the top, and yet they get the superstar Fernando Tatis Jr. Got Manny Machado there as well. Now, going after Juan Soto, aggressive, a handful of prospects. The last thing you want to do is make that deal. You know the time. You got a relatively narrow window. The end of this season and 2 more. And then you have to pay Soto. Might be $1 billion by then. Who knows, right? It's already turned out $440 million. Talking about the Tiger Woods deal yesterday, turning down $700 to $800 million for the Live Series. Crazy. So I know it's a bit of hyperbole, but not that far off. And that has been the beauty of baseball, especially watching this Captain documentary series on Derek Jeter, having to go back, unfortunately, from the Braves fan perspective and seeing the Yankees dominate, win World Series after World Series, and if not win it, play for it. That reign of dominance is not what baseball has been the last several years, with a bunch of different winners and a bunch of different market sizes, even being able to win. Yeah, Troy says, Anthony, good battle for last place in NL Central. It's a rough place to be. Testing your fandom. Much respect for those of you who get through it, come through to the other side. Gamecock fans, I think, know all about it. And that's a great place. Actually, I do have to mention the larger news from baseball's trading deadline yesterday. Unfortunately, the best broadcaster of all time, Vin Scully, passes away at the age of 94. 67 years, Vin Scully broadcasted Dodger games. Started in Brooklyn. Youngest to ever do it in the World Series at age 25. And did it at the highest level up until just a few years ago. Impossible to hear his voice, from my perspective, not feel good. Just that simple. There's some voices that go the opposite way immediately, right? You hear that voice, get that feeling of, Fran Drescher from The Nanny and that laugh. That's what pops in my brain for some reason. Vin Scully. It's just a delivery, right? It's almost like music or poetry or a combination. Just the way that, or the way that he made me feel listening to him. And it was from a different era for sure. I was reading more about him this morning and talked about how he grew up. His father passed away at the age of 7. He would move to the Bronx. I think at that point, the family moved to the Bronx, and he would lay right under the radio listening to the college football game of the week on the radio. And obviously, his early career was all about radio broadcasts. The only way most fans could experience a game, and the theater of the mind that is created from listening to a baseball game. Hear the sounds in the background and your connection to the game, your eyes for that game are the broadcast. And Vin Scully being that person for millions of fans through the years. So special. American treasure. I don't think it's going too far for sure. I wanted to pass that along, especially when we were talking about baseball. But talking about fans and being loyal. Gamecock fans at the top of the list for sure. You guys see this most South Carolina story ever yesterday. Saw it. David Cloninger from the Charleston Post and Courier writing a pretty in-depth story about the live mascot that is Sir Pittsburgh. And this seems to be, if you got an example of the most South Carolina story ever being more South Carolina than this, I would love to do it. Apparently, this is still going to be a tradition, and yet the name of the live Gamecock mascot has to change because there's a contract involved, and there's also a difference of opinion in how the animal should be presented or should be treated moving forward. And it has something, it has directly to do with the anatomy of a rooster. That's how I understand it. You guys seen this story? Maybe you can correct me. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. I almost hope I am. But it sounds to me like the couple who originally started this tradition, which we're going back not quite 15 years, somewhere in there. You ever been to a game? A baseball game is the most obvious place you can see it, right? I think that's actually where it started, and then it kind of branched off to football. So, just so happened, Gamecock fans, Gamecocks, they also had the rooster. They had the ideas, bringing the live mascot there, keeping it kind of on the top of the dugout for Gamecock baseball game. That parlayed into being on the sideline for football games. Sir Big Spur, you've seen it on nearly every televised football game ever, right? You get the close-up of the live rooster, the video board in the back, the Williams-Brice crowd in the back. Unique. Part of what makes college football great. Pageantry. Can't make this up. You don't get live animals on the sidelines of NFL games, right? Trying to double check that. Grew up a Redskins fan, and a lot of those fans would wear the big noses for the Hogs, sporting the offensive lineman, their nickname, and they would sing "Hail to the Redskins" and the whole thing, but it's a different type deal than having Ugga on the sideline, having Smokey. Gotta watch out for Smokey biting you on the sideline. And Sir Big Spur also did. But apparently, the original couple that was doing this, getting older and realizing that they need to not continue to do this game in and game out. They happened to cross paths with another couple, as I understand it, that loved the tradition, loved the animal, they trust. They took it over. If there was a contract involved somehow, the detail of that is a little fuzzy for me as I read it yesterday. I guess to continue to use the name or the name with the, I don't know, with the school or however it works. Well, there's been a disagreement now between the original couple and the couple that is doing it now, and how the live mascot is presented with, as I understand it, it's like a part of the rooster's anatomy, the top of the head, that's called a comb, I think, and it's there to help naturally cool the animal. But I think the original couple, pretty sure, please, yeah, this is a mind-boggling story to me. So if I screwed up the details, my apologies. But I think the original couple cut that part off because it would not have been, again, saying this out loud, it's kind of crazy, would not have been how an actual Gamecock would have been presented in a cockfight, as I understand it, because it would be another point of weakness, I think. So if we're talking about fighting Gamecocks, that's not how a realistic one would be presented. And I think the current couple said, Yeah, they understand that, but I think they thought it was maybe cruel and inhumane to cut something off of the actual live rooster that would have helped keep the animal cool and more comfortable in the whole thing. And that leads us to where we are. I think the contract, it was Eric Nichols, the marketing director at Carolina, who was quoted in the article saying, I think that, yep, they've come to a place where they can't continue doing it how they've always done it before, because I think the contract ran out. Maybe it was a contract with the school to have them on the sidelines or use the name, or maybe it was a contract with the original owners and the current caretakers to use that name, and the original owners are saying, nope, can't do it anymore. No more Sir Big Spur. So it still can be an animal, but you can't call him Sir Big Spur. Anthony. Sir Big Spur already lives like a king on campus. This is getting that way. Good morning to you too, Roger. Just trying to relay what I see as the most South Carolina story ever. A controversy over the live rooster mascot that has been on the sidelines of Gamecock football games for a long time, been on the dugout or around Founders Park for sure for Gamecock baseball for a long time. One of the craziest things I've ever heard. So one of those that you just can't make. You absolutely cannot make that up. Again, it's a Charleston Post and Courier story. David Cloninger wrote that thing. August 3rd, 2022. Incredible. So, Whit Merrifield and Jordan Montgomery, new homes in Major League Baseball after yesterday's major trade deadline. You guys saw the big NFL news too, right? Very interesting timing that the day after the Deshaun Watson ruling comes down, which they waited all the way until training camps were open. But the day after that ruling came out, the NFL conveniently came to a conclusion and found that the Miami Dolphins absolutely tampered with both Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Bucks, while he was still the quarterback there, and did not ask permission to talk to him, and former New Orleans Saints coach Sean Payton, while he was coaching with the Saints, did not ask permission and explored the future, the idea of getting both Tom Brady and Sean Payton down to Miami. And now they've lost the first round pick, I think, maybe third, fourth round pick as well. That was a punishment. Saw a tweet going by yesterday that Tom Brady has been involved in all three NFL punishments where
first round draft picks were taken. Fascinating stuff. Was the Patriots were stripped of one because of a video situation back in the day. Then you had Deflategate. Now you got this. I mean, the Miami Dolphins need to be relevant, haven't been relevant, certainly like they used to be back in the Dan Marino days when I was growing up, and this is not the way you want to do it. Trying to steal a quarterback and a coach and then being obvious enough to get dinged for it. So some of the headlines from yesterday, we're going to get moving now. Getting in the car with a very busy man. Look at Scotty Eisberg on the way. Oh, showing a little leg this morning, Scotty. Impressive stuff there outside.
Oh, we're showing leg. Yeah, let's pull that down there. Oh.
How's the Citadel football team looking this morning?
Very different. A very different look Citadel team this year. It starts with the head coach, Brent Thompson. Showed up 30 pounds lighter. He's been running 7 to 10 miles a day. He just said simply the last 3 years he didn't like the coach that he was, and he wanted to have more energy and just be able to coach better. So he started with himself and dropped 30 pounds. And then he added a right-hand man, if you will. He added like a chief of staff or basically his assistant, and it's a guy that everyone knows, Joe Call, longtime Somerville head coach, Oceanside head coach, and, oh, by the way, grandson of John McKissick, who played quarterback for the Citadel. He said that's made a big difference. And then as far as the team goes, the biggest difference is, they're going all in on the transfer portal like everybody is, but it's a lot different at the Citadel. Obviously, you just have to bring in grad transfers at the Citadel, and in doing that, they brought in Wofford's quarterback from last year, from the last 4 years, Peyton Derrick, which is interesting because it's the Zeb Nolan situation. They brought him in as a grad assistant. Now he's vying to be the head of the starting quarterback at the Citadel.
What a crazy deal, man. This time last year, it still hadn't happened yet, I don't think. It didn't happen until a week into preseason practice, the Zeb Nolan situation. I saw, Hunter Johnson is basically the same deal over at Clemson, coming back from Northwestern after originally started. And now you got that same situation at the Citadel. I guess this is going to be the new trend.
The difference is that Peyton Derrick was working at Home Depot, and Brent Thompson's like, dude, I still think you can play. And obviously, an option offense that we run. He was literally working at Home Depot. And Thompson talked to him, brought him in for a couple days. He said a lot of the terminology was pretty much the same. And, he said, man, I don't know if I can get back in there and be squatting in the weight room. And Thompson said, well, you better be if you want to play quarterback. But if you want to play quarterback and you want to get back in the weight room, we'd like to have you. And if nothing else, to bring competition to and also simply as far as a quarterback goes. So that's
Got Scotty popping in and out on us there. Scotty's on the move in Charleston right now from the Citadel, headed to some high school football practice, doing the due diligence as the sports director for WCIV-TV, and gathering all the football. How does it feel to see football, man?
It's great. It's hot. It's muggy. It's Charleston, so you kind of knew this would be happening. But no, it's good. I'm heading out to Berkeley County right now, so I'll hit Cane Bay, Goose Creek, Stratford today.
All right,
we'll try to schools out in Berkeley. It's like you enjoy the summer while you can, but you're always kind of scraping to fines to put on TV in the summer, and you get to this point, and now it's this overabundance of, all right, we got 34 high schools, and we got we call it basically 6 colleges that we show, and everything else like that. It's a great time of year.
And just coming back from Canada as well, you got in one last trip there to the hockey Holy Land.
I did, yeah. No, it was great. Weather was awesome. 55, 56 degrees at night. It was fantastic. And Montreal is an awesome city, great food city. My kids loved it. No real sports on the trip. Usually we were able to weave some sports into the trips we do on the summer. Unfortunately, the Montreal Alouettes were away, and I think FC Montreal, I think they were away, but it doesn't matter because I wasn't going to a soccer game on my vacation anyway. And there's no more Montreal Expos, so we weren't able to go sneak a sporting event into this trip, but I'll take it. It was great couple days away, a great week away, and now it's back to business with football around the Lowcountry.
I've seen via social media that you've had some travel issues here in the last several weeks with flights being canceled out of Charleston and not turning out how you wanted them to. How was this travel situation overall, U.S. to Canada and back?
All good, because we flew within the U.S. and then we drove to Canada, so that wasn't an issue. But Breeze Airways rolled through Charleston. They rolled in here like gangbusters. All flights $29. We were buying them up left and right until 5 of our flights got canceled. So we ended up, it was what it was. I guess it wasn't going to last long. It didn't last at all. And so we ended up, the problem with Breeze Airways is they just give you Breeze credit. Like, what am I going to do with Breeze credit? So we ended up, we were able to fly to Hartford, Connecticut, and drive about 5.5 hours from Hartford through Vermont up to Montreal, and it worked out fine. All was good, and it worked out. We got up there for the $29, but it certainly was not as advertised. It wasn't as easy as it was advertised to be.
Will you, moving forward, change your attitudes towards those too good to be true deals, or are you still going after them? I'm
still going after them. Yeah, I'm still going after them. I mean, you get an email for $29 to go somewhere. How do you not? I mean, it's my guilty pleasure of I sit at the work at the end of my day and I start clicking around, and next thing you know, I'm like texting my wife, guess what? We're going to Montreal next week. And what? She's used to it at this point. The one thing I will not do anymore, what really hosed me on all these trips, was that I book it. I got all excited. So then I jump in, I book a car and a hotel on Hotwire. Well, those are non-refundable. So at that point, you've got to get to that destination, whatever it's going to cost you, however it is you get there. You still have to get there. So when the flight gets canceled, then you've got the hotel and the car hanging over your head already paid for, which makes it a lot more difficult.
And so those $29 deals turned out to be an interesting investment for sure, man. But I like how you're still staying with it. You're an eternal optimist that way. Maybe it was those years being a South Carolina student back in the day, or being in the Palmetto State as long as you have. I'm interested. I've never been to Montreal. I've always heard good things. How much French?
Awesome.
How much French do you get up there?
A ton. I mean, right inside the city, anyone will speak French or English. It starts with French, and then if you say, do you speak English? Yeah, no problem. You get 15 minutes out of that city, it's 100% French, 100% French, and it's awesome. I mean, that's kind of why we did it, for that experience for our kids, to get to live that, to immerse themselves in that culture and get to just see something different that they've never seen before. And it was town, so we were out of Montreal, but we just pulled into a grocery store to get some like sandwiches and stuff for lunch for the ride, and I was trying to order a turkey wrap with mustard. She spoke zero English. I speak zero French. I didn't know how to say turkey. I didn't know how to say wrap, and I didn't know how to say mustard. And so I was up the creek without a paddle there. And we went about 3 minutes back and forth, and it was not working. I said, don't worry about it. And I went and bought a pack of wraps, a bottle of mustard, and a pack of turkey, and made them on my own. So, it's a ton of French. If you go to Old Montreal, it's a lot of French. And it feels like it's Paris. It's all street side cafes and everything. And it's an awesome city. It's an awesome walking city, and it's beautiful. There's a mountain right in the middle of the city that you could look out on the whole city. It's this beautiful park, and I can't say enough good things about Montreal. It's one of our favorite cities to go to.
Man, I can barely get my kids to figure out English. How do you even approach talking to your kids about French, and much less taking them and exposing them to that environment?
Well, they did not speak any French, nor did they try. I mean, and Google Translate's pretty easy on your phone these days. I mean, okay. It's pretty easy to get your point across with Google Translate if you want to do that.
Except apparently turkey wrap with mustard.
Well, yeah, because I have a company cell phone, and they do not pay for the international plan at Channel 4. I learned that lesson the last time I was in Canada, when I rolled up a $250 data bill. So I couldn't use my own phone, and my wife was in the car with the kids, so I did not have a phone to Google Translate with.
All right, let's move over, transition in Canada over to Toronto. I know you're buddies with Justin Smoke. I know you traveled down. What was it, Miami, the All-Star game that he was at, that you went and bombarded him? Is that right, Scott?
Yes, yes, it was.
And if you've ever been around Justin Smoke, I think Gamecock fans probably know this pretty good. I don't know. I was just talking about one of the most South Carolina stories ever that popped up in the Charleston Post and Courier, that Sir Big Spur controversy now. Have you seen this thing?
Yeah, I saw it.
I think that's one of the most South Carolina stories ever. I think Justin Smoke might be one of the most South Carolina guys ever in a lot of ways.
Yes.
He's a big hunting and fishing guy. Baseball, just laid back, like Dustin Johnson, almost like personality in a lot of ways. What is the takeaway after all the years? What is it, 3 or 4? I think Justin Smoke spent playing for the Blue Jays. How does the Smoke family view their Toronto experience?
They'll always consider themselves Blue Jays. I mean, that's their team that he will associate with. I mean, I know he played for the Rangers, he played for the Mariners, he played for the Giants, he played for the Brewers, but Toronto was their home. I mean, that was the only place he was an all-star. It's where he had his best year. It's where they had just a huge ovation for him when they knew it was going to be his last game in Toronto. That is where they always will consider their baseball home in the majors. They loved it, absolutely loved living there. Loved everything about it. The people adopted them. I know Kristen, his wife, who's wonderful, was really popular on social media, just with her tweets and everything with the folks in Toronto. And we hung out with them in Toronto when we went up there a couple of years ago, and our kids went to the aquarium and everything together. And you could just see how much they had embraced living in Toronto. And I mean, you couldn't find a more different place than Charleston than Toronto, but they adjusted really, really well to being there, and Justin really liked it. Now, I'm not saying that Justin would rather be there than here on his boat or in the woods and killing whatever he's killing. Like, I get that. Like, that's Justin Smoke, the true Justin Smoke. And he's enjoying being home with the family and everything now. And, you know, he's texted me a couple times jokingly saying, dude, you know, like, he'll see a story I do on the news, but you think they're hiring a former major leaguer as a coach and stuff like that. So he might be getting a little bored, but you know, with baseball in the rear view, it's you know, it's a whole new life right now for Justin down here. But you know, he's dad. You know, he's doing the school carpools and everything else like we all do. It's funny, we were driving next to each other last week on Savannah Highway doing you know, camp carpools at the same time, and we were laughing about it on text afterwards. So, you know, he's back to living normal life down here, but now I guess we got a new Gamecock up there in Whit Merrifield.
Yeah, it's why I brought it up, heading from the Royals to the Blue Jays and getting to play with as opposed to a team that's been out of it for a while. Will be interesting to follow. Did you see this too? It made me feel really old. You want to guess how old Whit Merrifield is?
I lost you for a second. What did you say there, Tim?
I said it made me feel really old reading more about this trade. You want to guess how old Whit is right now?
31, 32 maybe?
33. Just to
33,
make us
feel, wow.
Yeah, that much older.
Well, so he was 20, 21, 22 when he had the hit in Omaha. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. That's over a decade ago. Yeah, it makes you feel old that Whit Merrifield is considered an older player in Major League Baseball for sure.
Right. No doubt, man. And a guy that's led the league in hits a couple of times, led the league in stolen bases 3 times, most doubles in American League last year, hitting just 240 this year. So struggling a little bit, just crossed over 1,000 career hits, I think, for his major league career. It will be interesting to see what kind of impact he can have here and how that works out for Merrifield there. I know you were being originally a New York guy, also Gamecocks involved. The Yankees trading Jordan Montgomery to the Cardinals. What do you make of that situation?
Well, 2. Jordan Montgomery to the Cardinals and J.P. Sears to the A's back-to-back days. So 2 South Carolina guys, both who live in Charleston. I don't know Montgomery very well, but I know J.P. Sears really well. And, I mean, J.P. Sears was lights out this year. He was 3-0. I think 22 innings pitched. He only gave up a run or 2. I mean, he was lights out. You know, when he got the opportunity. So I think he's going to crack the rotation a lot more in Oakland. That'll help him out. Jordan Montgomery, I always found him to be kind of a weird fit in New York, you know, with all of the spot. No, he's a laid back South Carolina, you know, Sumter guy. So, you know, part of me was like, you know, he didn't really care about the spotlight of New York, but I don't know how it affected him. That I don't know. But you know, he was kind of a steadying force with the Yankees, I felt like, and he stayed up in the bigs for quite a while. And you know, I think the Yankees have to, you know, Brian Cashman knows what he's doing. They're a tremendous hitting ball club. Aaron Judge is having one of the best seasons we've ever seen. He's just had to, he just had to do what he felt was going to be best pitching wise and covering all bases with that. And, obviously he did what he thought he had to do.
Montgomery, 3.69 ERA and 21 starts this year, man. You talk about JP Sears being good. So is Montgomery, but always kind of quiet, under the radar. And you're right, an interesting fit for New York personality-wise. But I remember Bobby Richardson obviously worked out well for him way back in the day, being a Sumter guy. And I think reading the recap of the trade, he talked to the media, I think, pretty much immediately there in New York. They said they could see he was kind of shaken by this thing, and it has been his baseball family. And now moving from one storied franchise to another is from a career standpoint, if you got to go to the National League, I would probably say that the St. Louis Cardinals is a heck of a place to go for sure for Jordan Montgomery. So it will be interesting to follow him as well. What about the big trade yesterday with Soto going to the Padres?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. I was going to go back to the Yankees for a quick second, and nobody is fit better in New York than Brett Gardner,
Right.
Orangeburg County kid who lasted there for 13 years. Nobody has worked better, for the Yankees than Gardner. And he was a little more intense, I felt, than Montgomery. But that being said, completely worked as a true South Carolina guy who's back here in Somerville now. And, I think he enjoys the fact that he can grow a beard and be out in the woods and all the things that he couldn't do in New York. I think Gardner's enjoying that. But, it showed how much he loved New York and how much he loved the Yankees that, I think he was offered something like $3-4 million this year by the Blue Jays, and he turned it down. Gardner turned it down because he wanted to retire a Yankee. It was Yankee or bust for him. So I think that showed how much that organization meant to him.
Speaking of that, and I am not a Yankees fan because of how they beat up on the Braves, especially in the World Series a couple of times in the 90s. And now I've relived this watching The Captain, the Derek Jeter documentary. You watched it at all?
Yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes. Yeah, I thought it was pretty well done. I actually enjoyed it, and I'm not a Yankee fan either. I grew up a Mets fan, so I enjoyed it. I thought, I never had an issue with Jeter. I always liked Jeter. He was the captain. He was the guy, and it was, Yankees beat the Mets in the 2000 World Series and everything. I was there actually for that. But yeah, no, I always liked Jeter, and I thought the documentary was pretty well done. Although we were driving through New York this past weekend, listening to sports talk radio. There was a lot.
Scotty going in and out there on his way. I think he said to Beaufort High School, maybe from the Citadel.
You lose me there for a second, Tim?
Yep, you just said you're going through New York Sports Talk Radio, a little controversy. Yep, and now you can't get me on the other end.
Yeah, no, I got you now. Yeah, there was a little controversy sports talk radio because last week was Old Timers Day at Yankee Stadium, and Jeter didn't show up for it. Jeter didn't come for it. And, you don't have the Mantles and the DiMaggios or, whoever else anymore to be the last guy out. Jeter would be it. And Jeter did not come. Now, they're going to have a Derek Jeter night coming up. I don't know if you wanted to, didn't want to, take the, spotlight off of that night, but Jeter didn't show up, and it ended up, the last Yankee announced, which is always a big deal on Old Timers Day. The last Yankee announced was Bernie Williams. And, Bernie was a great player, but Bernie Williams was not Derek Jeter by any stretch.
He's really good in this documentary. I really like hearing from him, and he's wearing this get-up where he doesn't even look like a baseball player at all. Bernie, I'm talking about. Episodes 3 and 4.
He's a musician now.
Oh, is that what it is? He does kind of look like a musician. Okay, that makes sense. Wearing that get up. Episodes 3 and 4, The Captain, by the way, definitely worth watching. At least as good, I would say, as those first couple episodes, because they get a little bit more A-Rod going. And to me, that's maybe the most interesting part of all this. Also, just to get more from Jeter, just about his teammates, how he handled situations, man. It's fascinating to me. Before we get the Juan Soto stuff, that was the big trade yesterday. What about Vin Scully, man? If we're going to be talking about big-time baseball stories. Vin Scully we're broadcasting nerds, so we're probably biased, right? But to me, he's the greatest broadcaster of all time, and I don't even know if it's close, man. What about you?
I agree with you. I mean, if you were to put a Mount Rushmore of broadcasters up, he's easily one. I mean, I think he's easily one. I probably put Jim Nantz up there, maybe Bob Costas, and then that fourth one would be maybe up for grabs on the fourth one. Al Michaels, I don't know who, Marv Albert. I mean, there's, I don't know who the fourth. I mean, I haven't really thought about it. But if you told me Mount Rushmore broadcasters in sports, absolutely, without question, number one is Vin Scully, and it's not even a question. It's not even a question because of longevity in organization, what he saw, what he called, and his sports storytelling ability. No question about it. He's number one. He's, for me, number one to go on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, agreed. The only name that I didn't hear you say there would probably be in the mix there, Howard Cosell, I'm guessing.
Of course, Howard Cosell. Yeah.
A broadcasting standpoint. What is it about Vin Scully? Can you put words to it? I was trying to do it earlier. To me, it was the delivery, hearing the voice, and instantly he made me feel good, if that made sense. And I think it was kind of like almost like a musical poetry delivery that he had and just his overall demeanor.
Yeah, I think it was that. I loved his storytelling ability, his ability to reach back to the past and pull stories and weave that through a broadcast. It wasn't just strike one, ball one, inside corner, uptight, whatever it may be. It wasn't baseball terminology. It was his weaving of a story into the way he told, he called a game. To me was the thing. And it was the fact that every guy loved him. Every player loved him. I mean, you never saw or heard a bad thing about Vin Scully, ever. And the fact that he called the Brooklyn Dodgers and the LA Dodgers a great voice, just a great turn on the radio and paint the picture type voice. And I think the other thing is it wasn't like overly regionalized, like a Marv Albert is so New York on his call. While Vin Scully was from New York, it wasn't overly in your face with that accent. It was just the dulcet tones, this is just a beautiful cadence to the way he spoke and told stories within a baseball game that, to me, I mean, he's number one. He's number one. And I think Jim Nantz is great. When you hear "Hello, friends," like you kind of get the same feeling, especially when it's Sunday at the Masters or at the Final Four. Like I think Jim Nantz has that, but what Jim Nantz doesn't have is that longevity. And he's been around a long time, but not the amount of time that Vin Scully was around and doing it, continuously.
Oh yeah, and to me, it's the difference between radio and TV as well. I know Vin Scully did TV and a bunch of it later on in his career, but the connection that fans had to have with baseball broadcasters, specifically doing games on the radio for when he did them in Brooklyn and then moving forward the transition to LA, man. Vin Scully, can't say enough about him.
And I love the fact that he never yelled at you. I can't stand when announcers yell at you, and he didn't yell at you. What's the greatest call he ever had? Probably the Kirk Gibson home run, and you can sense the excitement, but he wasn't yelling at you. And it's not a hit on guys who do that. That's their style. But he didn't do it, and I always appreciated that he wasn't yelling at you. He wasn't changing the inflection of his voice to yell at you. He changed the inflection that you knew it was a huge, improbable moment, but it didn't change to the fact that you're like, stop yelling at me, stop. It didn't get to that point.
Yeah, to me, that means that he never made it about him. It was always about what was going on. You mentioned how players loved him. I think that's probably the main reason, because they understood that as well, or maybe that's a thing that you just it's a feel you get. All right, the Juan Soto to the San Diego Padres, man. Machado, Tatis, and Soto. That is a problem.
Yeah, no, that is a huge. They are, if their pitching can keep up with their hitting, yeah, they're looking pretty darn good. I found fun. You knew he was moving, and that's a heck of a place for him to move too. I think the interesting thing is just following Nationals fans on Twitter now. Like, you want us to buy tickets to this minor league team? Like, what the heck are we? No, absolutely not. I mean, to go from World Series champions to where they are now is, man, you talk about it. I mean, it's the business of baseball. I get it, but man, you talk about a team that just fell off the map. That is a team that just fell off the map.
5 prospects, though, for Juan Soto. If 2 of those guys hit, then I think National fans will certainly look at this a lot differently. You get 3 or 4 of those guys to be really good players for you, and then you can be the Dallas Cowboys beneficiary of the Herschel Walker trade back in the day. That possibility's out there, but as we sit here today, boy, the Padres look strong, and they look to be set up. I didn't realize it, that they get them for the end of this year and then 2 more seasons on the current contract. So that's why the value was as high as it was. It was pretty striking to me, man, how quickly that relationship disintegrated when they throw out 15 years and $440 million for the Nationals. And then I think they didn't even charter him a flight to the home run derby a couple of days after.
That was
story, right?
That was the breaking point. There's no doubt that was the breaking point. You don't charter the guy a flight to the home run derby. You knew that was the breaking point. You knew it was over, and then he goes out there and wins the thing. There's no doubt about it that it was over in Washington. And, he's one of the great young players in the game. It's hard to free. I mean, he's been around for a little, but he's only 23 years old. That is a young phenom right there.
No doubt about it. And then the fact that he already has the prior relationship with Fernando Tatis Jr., both being from the Dominican, I think probably went into this to some degree. It's one thing to get really good players. It's another thing for them to get along really well, to like each other, and then to kind of integrate everybody into the team. I think if you're buying stock right now, if you bought it yesterday for the San Diego Padres, you're a really happy guy. But I would not bet against them being a really good team for a long time, assuming these guys stay healthy, which is, I guess, the big question mark, especially as we talk. Tatis Jr. coming off a broken wrist, I think, is what he's been dealing with. Big NFL news yesterday was the Dolphins getting dinged for a first-round pick for tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton, coming off of the big news the day before, not coincidental timing, about the Deshaun Watson ruling. I know that's something that you've had a strong opinion about. What'd you think of the 6 games? I don't think I saw you on social media being one of the many who pointed out that 6-game suspension, not nearly as many games as others for less serious, it seems like, offenses and crimes that you're being accused of anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I was on vacation, so I didn't want to go big into social media because that just takes you down a rabbit hole of arguing with people and everything else like that. And I certainly didn't want to do that on vacation. But I will say I don't think he should play in the NFL again. I don't think he should play in the NFL again. I mean, he is a serial, to me, it's almost like a sex offender almost. I mean, that's the way I look at it in my head. And I know by virtue of law, he is not, but by virtue of what he did, and it's obvious what he did, I mean, you put the word serial in front of it. And I've got 2 daughters, and I work with a female in my office, in my sports office, and Natalie is like beside herself about this. Like, how could he only get, what is he going to lose, $340,000 and still make $46 million or whatever it is? And she's just livid, beside herself about it. When you work in an industry where women are trying to be on equal footing as men and have come so far to have somebody that you put out there on a pedestal who did this, I don't think he should play in the NFL again. I truly believe that. And I know he gets people's, but he's always been a good guy. He's been soft-spoken. Like, no, I don't. I mean, you could be that on the outside, but the fact that you've done this 60, 70 times that we know about, I don't agree with it one bit of the 6-game suspension. And oh, by the way, on top of that, the fact that I don't agree with some of the things that he has done. The amount of he was raised by a single mom, and he was raised with the help of others and everything like that. To disrespect women the way that he did, and I think by paying them off, by coming to a settlement, you're agreeing that you did that. To me, I don't care that they're not going to press charges anymore. To me, you've done the wrong thing, and it's been proven that you did the wrong thing by paying them off. I just don't think you should be playing in the NFL. I really don't. I'll never pull for the guy in the NFL. I'll never do that. And I just think it's a slap in the face to way too many people who are paying fans of the NFL.
Cleveland Browns fans. And it's your buddy Stuart Lake, who I respect a lot for being a Cleveland Browns fan. Yeah. To me, this was Arizona Cardinals-esque to put themselves into this situation. What the Cardinals did with that Kyler Murray clause, I have no sympathy for them. They deserve all the criticism that they got. It was just a dumb move all the way around.
And the fact that they didn't vet him. The fact that they said they vetted him and they obviously did not vet it fully, that none of those, I think it was the New York Times article said that none of those women were called by the Cleveland Browns. If you say you're going to vet the guy and you don't call any of those women who were on the list, how do you not?
Well, it's very simple, Scotty. You care about winning more than you care about bad press or being associated with someone who a lot of people like yourself view as a bad guy. And
he's a bad guy.
That organization has been losing for so long that I think their values are so skewed that they just didn't care. And it's one thing to not care, right? It's one thing to be the Carolina Panthers and say, we really need a quarterback, but this is a toxic situation, so we're not going to go after that. We're not going to pursue him from a trade or from the outside looking in. It's another thing to not only pursue him like Cleveland did, but then to pay him $230 million to set this contract up, knowing that a suspension is going to come. Yeah. That to me is the mind-boggling part, man. That's where it is over the line from where I'm sitting. Like, I get it. There are terrible situations that leagues have to work through. But then the Cleveland Browns did the NFL such a disservice here by $230 million guaranteed, just throwing gas on top of all of it. And now they have to deal with this mess. And again, no sympathy for Deshaun Watson in this situation or the Cleveland Browns or the NFL.
None. Zero. Do something to women. You don't get to play football anymore in my head. You do something like that. You do what Ray Rice did. You do what Deshaun Watson. You don't get to play football. You don't get that privilege of playing football anymore in my head. That's, to me, it is the ultimate. You have a platform that you should be a role model. And the fact that as soon as you cross that line to somebody who's basically defenseless against you, you've crossed that line into, you've lost, to me, in my head, you've lost that privilege to play football again. I just, that's the way I truly feel about it. I think it's a disgrace. The second he steps on that field after 6 games, if it doesn't change with the NFL, it's a complete disgrace to me.
I think I remember reading somewhere that Steve Spurrier had that as one of his very clear rules, right? You do anything to a woman, you're out of the program. And it's
and I think maybe I understand more because I have 2 girls, and so it 100% to me, it changes my view. It changes the way I view it. I have 2 girls now. If anyone ever, put their hands on them or did something that inappropriate or egregious to them, I couldn't imagine the way I'd feel. So 100%, I think it's a disgrace that he's still playing football.
What'd you make of the Dolphin stuff with Brady and Peyton?
I didn't follow it as deeply. I mean, I guess the crime fit the punishment, I would guess. I mean, I didn't read as deeply into it, but because maybe I just didn't feel as strongly about it. I didn't care as much about it as I did about the Deshaun thing. I just wasn't as invested in it. But it's kind of a low move by them without question.
Yeah, but not too surprising knowing what the Dolphins have been recently as well. It kind of goes into that Cleveland Browns mindset of they value winning so much. They're willing to cross lines that other organizations are not. How you doing time-wise over there?
I just pulled up to Cane Bay High School, the Cobras. I just pulled up as we speak.
Nice. Well, get after it. They don't have any Gethers left over there, do they? They have any big-time prospects?
There's never that you're thinking of Carver's Bay, not Cane Bay.
My bad.
Cane Bay would be the I think they've only had one D1 guy. It was RJ Roderick was the guy from Cane Bay. Relatively new school. I think it's like 11, 12 years old. They haven't had a ton of D1 guys, but they've had guys that played college ball, and their head coach Russell Zaire, good guy, been around football in South Carolina for a long time. And I'm also doing another story here today. Their offensive line coach, Jeff Bleemer, great guy, former NFL player. He got a personal invitation from Dick Vermeil to be at his Hall of Fame induction this week up in Canton, and because he played for him in Philadelphia. So I'm going to do a little thing with Jeff on getting to go as Dick Vermeil's guest to the Hall of Fame induction.
Classic. I couldn't make that up, Scotty. Well done. Good luck out there. Thanks for hopping on with us, man.
All right. Sounds good. See ya.
Scott Eisberg is only he can do en route, running around Charleston from Citadel football practice this morning over to Cane Bay High School. And then you just heard how he does what he does. The connections, the NFL, the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. That's Scotty, man. That is who he is. Great time for us to take a slight little break here. Wanted to play for you some of what Rick Sandford recently had to say. Actually, we'll give you some Charleston connections since Scotty's down there. Charleston going to be all in on the Gamecocks here 1 week from this Friday, I believe it is August 12th, and you'll hear about it from the Charleston Gamecock Club president here about the details of their kickoff party. I know there are just a few tickets left. The last I saw, you can check out the Twitter account Gamecock or Charleston Gamecock Club and get all the details about still being able to sponsor. I think they got a Facebook page as well, Charleston Gamecock Club. If you search for that, it's pretty easy to find. But this was from last week's show, and we got it separated in a segment on the YouTube channel as well. Just more info about what the Charleston Gamecock Club is doing here in a couple of days with their preseason kickoff party. Plenty more show coming, including investing in college athletes is a thing.
These events are a big party. They're a lot of fun, but they are a fundraiser at the end of the day, and it goes right back to the student athletes, and that's really the most important thing.
And again, if you're interested in buying a ticket, you're interested in sponsoring the event, just hit Jen up. The email is charlestongamecockclub@gmail.com, and you can go to their Facebook page as well. You just search Charleston Gamecock Club. It'll pop right up. You'll see all the information there. So that was Jen from the Charleston Gamecock Club. Again, if you're in the area, big Gamecock fan, I know that'll be a lot of fun for you. Wanted to tell you about one of the sponsors on the program, Freedom Primary Care. My wife and my oldest son just went there a couple of days ago. He had an ear issue. We're headed to the beach. We won't have a show on Friday, celebrating my sister's 40th birthday, trying to do one last beach weekend before school starts. So wanted to take care of any kind of ear issue before he went down there. And my wife was thinking that maybe we had to go the antibiotic route and knock that thing out. We try to do what we can to avoid that if possible. And we went there. She went there. I asked my 9-year-old, how did it go, man? How long did you have to wait? He's like, 2 seconds. Well, how long did it take when you're in there? He's like, 5 minutes. A perfect 9-year-old doctor's visit for sure. But not just that. It's the fact that Freedom Primary Care values your freedom to make the decisions that are best for you and your family. That's why my family, I trust them with that care. And in this particular situation, We ended up holding off on the antibiotics, going a more natural route, and the ear has cleared up really quickly within 24 hours of going to Freedom Primary Care. A great example of how they take care of my family, and I know they can do the same for you, especially in these times. Trusting, and that's what my wife said to me yesterday. I think I heard her say is like just the feel that she had, the trust level she had with going into that office, the comfort level she had. That's why we go to Freedom Primary Care. I recommend you give them a call, 803-627-2447. They're up in Fort Mill, near where I live. If you're not in the area, still plenty of telemedicine options that you can go through now in the 21st century. Freedom Primary Care. Appreciate their support of the program. Please support those who support the show. Appreciate your support as well as we roll into the final 45 minutes of today. And we do it, again, a flurry of activity from the Major League Baseball trade deadline yesterday, right? That was those were the overwhelming headlines. Whit Merrifield, former Gamecock, going to the Toronto Blue Jays. Jordan Montgomery, former Gamecock, originally from Sumter, headed from the Yankees to the St. Louis Cardinals. The big Juan Soto trade over from the Nationals to the San Diego Padres. Unfortunately, it was the news of Vin Scully passing away at the age of 94, also a major baseball headline yesterday. From the Gamecock perspective, it is a recommitment after a decommitment, and that was kind of the odd part of the weekend story, right? It was a big weekend, the past weekend, for Gamecock recruiting. A couple of four-star guys commit to your program, in-state four-star guys especially, and at really important positions, defensive end and offensive line. Massive weekend in a lot of ways. But you did have a decommitment from a Florida defensive back in Cameron Upshaw. Well, apparently whatever the issue was that caused him to do that, that issue has been resolved, and he is now recommitted to the Gamecocks, giving them a class of 16 guys right now, 8 4-star guys, 8 3-star guys. Upshaw considered a 3-star type prospect. But also over the weekend, you did have, going into it, a couple of other 4-star guys who were set to commit, in a wide receiver, Carmelo Taylor from up in Virginia, and then an offensive lineman who goes by the nickname of Tree, and the actual name is way too difficult for me to pronounce, but from the D.C. area and DeMatha High School, but they pushed back their commitments. So nothing, now that Upshaw has recommitted, nothing negative to take out of last weekend, other than the fact that I think a lot of people were hoping for a 4-for-4 type weekend with all 4-star guys. That didn't happen, but the possibility of that happening, becoming reality, is still out there. And now you don't even have a guy decommitting in this process as well, losing zero recruiting momentum is kind of how I see it for Shane Beamer and company, just a couple of days ahead of opening up fall camp on Friday. And fall camp, I'll try to avoid that phrase, because if you go outside anywhere in the state of South Carolina or anywhere close, fall is about the last feel that you get. And this is preseason camp. I will try to refer to it as much as possible as that. And there are so many interesting things going into this preseason camp as opposed to years prior. We love college football in South Carolina, in the Southeastern Conference for sure. Every single August, it is going to be the main topic of conversation. But there are particular months, particular years where the stories are just that much more interesting, right? And that much more interesting in the best of ways. You could argue, and I know the media types especially will argue, that a coach on a hot seat is a really interesting story, and it'll get a lot of clicks these days and a lot of interest, and a lot of people will talk about it. But from my seat, those stories also come with a bad taste in your mouth, like leaving you with a feeling of, to me, it's always left me the feeling of like, yuck, man, that this entire situation, what the best case scenario is winning 7 games or 8 games and going to a mid-tier bowl game at best. Like that just gives me the general feeling around a program of, man, this is not fun to be a part of and talk about every single day. And again, I've gone through this now for a couple of decades being around the Gamecock football program. So I feel like I've seen the spectrum, right? The 21-game losing streak happened while I was at South Carolina. So being around the program during that time, been there. The SEC East Division Championship in 2010 and 3 straight top 10 seasons after that, covering the team, the program, the state of South Carolina every single day from a TV perspective after having done several years of radio before then. So I've been part of that. And then going through the Will Muschamp era, the end of the Steve Spurrier era, the Sean Elliott interim head coaching days, the reaction to the Will Muschamp hire, the evolution of Muschamp's first 2 years being positive, and then after that, and a falling off the map, and the fracturing of a fan base who wanted to support their coach, but they didn't have very many reasons, and they weren't seeing evidence to support the leadership of their program moving forward. Then the hire of Shane Beamer and how wildly interesting that was. To get the different perspectives, to get former players to come out in support of a guy who hadn't been a head coach. And to know at South Carolina, they just made it a thing with Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier of hiring Hall of Fame, national championship winning proven coaches. Then they went in almost the complete opposite direction and hired a guy who got his first head coaching job, and it didn't work out at Florida. And so now had that to prove, the massive chip on the shoulder, the recruiting background, a defensive genius type reputation coming in, and it didn't work out. And so now you hire a guy who's never even been a coordinator, that has a resume that looks a lot like a guy that your rival hired a decade prior, maybe a little bit more than that, right? 15 years prior. And it worked out real well for Clemson and Dabo Swinney. And year number one, I think most all Gamecock fans would say in its entirety. Certainly you wouldn't have said it during the East Carolina game or the Tennessee game, Texas A&M or some others, right? But at the end of the season, after the mayonnaise had been poured on Shane Beamer, Gamecock fans could not have felt better about the trajectory of the program, about where it's headed. And that's where we sit right here, a couple of days away from kicking off preseason camp, and then some, with Spencer Rattler, last year's preseason Heisman Trophy favorite, set to be your quarterback, with Austin Stogner, big tight end, coming over from Oklahoma with him, with a couple of wide receivers coming up from Arkansas State and James Madison, who have proven they can play college football on the outside and seem poised to add some much-needed depth to a wide receiver core that didn't have much outside of Josh Vann last year, but do have maybe some improved pieces in Xavier Legette, specifically, who's been battling injuries and hasn't become the guy that the Gamecock football program wanted him to become, needs him to become. So you got that on the outside, right? You still got Decarrion Joyner, who last time we saw him was a perfect 9 for 9. With 160 yards and a touchdown pass, ran for 60-plus yards, I think. Played the most snaps he's ever played in a game, I think 44 against North Carolina. Was the guy that a lot of Gamecock fans, I think, had always hoped he could be in a Carolina uniform, being Mr. Football in the state of South Carolina, having helped Fort Dorchester High School win a state championship as a sophomore quarterback, but had never been able to be. Had gotten beaten out by Ryan Helinski for a backup quarterback job behind Jake Bentley. Had very minimal snaps at quarterback and then minimal production when moved to wide receiver and other places on the field. But The last time you saw him, man, he was really good. Then you throw in an experienced offensive line, improved depth there. You throw in, your 2 leading rushers last year have moved on to pro football, and yet you get a guy in immediately who led Wake Forest in rushing last year, I believe, Christian Beal-Smith. You got a guy another year removed from a major knee surgery who came in as a program-changing type running back in Marshawn Lloyd. And you got Juju McDowell, who I think impressed everyone as a true freshman with his electricity when he touches the football, man. Undersized kind of guy, but the quickness, the speed, and football IQ that he showed seems to be 3 really solid options in the backfield there. Oh, by the way, Jaheim Bell, haven't even mentioned him, and he's probably the most highly thought of NFL prospect right now on the team. And doing all this on the offensive side of the ball, where Carolina struggled massively in year number 1. Massive struggles is the only fair way to look at that. 100+ is where most of the offensive numbers were in college football out of 131. So to have all of that going in, and that's just the offensive side of the ball, right? There's plenty on the defensive side as well. The recent stories centering around a couple of high school teammates over at Hammond playing for Eric Kimry and Jordan Birch, 5-star recruit, and Boogie Huntley, a 4-star guy on the defensive line now, looking to be coming into their own going into year number 3 of the program. Birch doing it on the outside. Huntley expected to do it on the inside with Zach Pickens, another guy with a NFL future for sure, another Mr. Football in the state of South Carolina. And playing for a defensive coordinator in Clayton White, who massively overachieved in year number 1, I think is the fair way to evaluate what we saw from the Gamecock defense last year. Got in a piece there, too, from the transfer portal, and Devontae Reed helping to shore up Jalen Foster's departure as an All-American safety. One of the best stories Carolina football has seen in recent memory. A walk-on guy, a guy that transferred up from Gardner-Webb, right? I think that's Foster's background. Ended up being an All-American safety with a bunch of turnovers, and Carolina leading the league in turnovers last year. To me, one of the things that's not been talked about maybe enough. So you got all of that going into the Gamecocks kicking off preseason practice. All of that and then some, right? You got a battle at kicker. You got Shane Beamer raised expectations year number 2. How does the team handle that? While balancing the raised energy, enthusiasm, optimism around the program that you want to have. To me, it's crazy when you go through game by game. How do you go through it? How do you guys do it? Because in my hand, I go back and forth, right? I see matchup against Georgia State. I think that should be a win. Carolina should have much more talent. And yet, I know that Georgia State went into Tennessee and beat an SEC team on the road. I've seen that happen against South Carolina. I've also seen the Gamecocks handle their business and make that what maybe a lot of national people would see on the schedule, like don't even think about it, move on. That's got to be a win for an SEC program in the night opener, where the stadium will be unlike it's ever been, with LED lights and the whole thing going. So that's just the first game. Then you go to Arkansas, and then you welcome Georgia in. Hello, SEC schedule. To me, you can't get a much more difficult first couple of games. When you're over in South Carolina, you got to travel all the way out to Arkansas. Historically, that hasn't gone well. I know there was the one that sticks out in my mind is Carolina basically apologizing to Arkansas's Brett Bielema. I think it was year number 1 for Bielema, and like, oh, sorry about that whooping. Nobody likes to get their butt beat and how that was taken afterward. Just classic Steve Spurrier. But outside of that one, man, it has been a very difficult thing for South Carolina to go to Arkansas and win. And especially in the Darren McFadden, Felix Jones days, really sticks out to me how Arkansas just would run all over Carolina, ran all over Carolina, with KJ Jefferson leading Arkansas in rushing last year from the quarterback position, and all their running backs back, and Sam Pittman having that program rolling and looking to contend in the West. You know they're going to be ready. So that one's going to be a wildly interesting one for me. Then you got to turn right around and play the defending national champs at home, noon September game. And then it goes from there, right? I think best case scenario for through 3 games is a 2-1 record for the Gamecocks. I know, who was it? Takeo Spikes, former Auburn standout, longtime NFL guy, said he's predicting the Gamecocks to beat Georgia there in week 3. It would be classic college football to lose week 2 there at Arkansas, then turn around and win week 3. But you get out of the first 3 games and you're 2-1. In my mind, you set yourself up. You're still riding a wave of positive momentum for sure. If you could beat either Arkansas or Georgia, you take care of Georgia State, you're in great shape because you get a bit of a lull in the schedule with some non-conference opponents next couple of weeks, and then it's all SEC all the time. And that positive momentum, how that offense is playing at that point to me, because I'm expecting a defense with similar type production as last year. I think that's a fair expectation for Clayton White and company. Total defense somewhere in the 35 to 45 range. I mean, if you improve on what you had last year, that's ideal. I don't know if that's fair with the personnel that I'm seeing. I think you lose J.J. Enigbare was a big piece on the outside. Aaron Sterling. Those are 2 pretty important guys that aren't back. I haven't seen enough added to the defensive side of the ball to say, yeah, I'm thinking that Carolina is going to be much improved. And you got to realize, too, I remember Lorenzo Ward going into the 2014 season after Jadeveon Clowney had left, telling us that the Gamecock defense was going to be better without Jadeveon Clowney. And then we saw that entire season opposing offenses scoring touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, especially in the fourth quarter, after having worn down a defense. And what we were seeing, we didn't know it at the time, was the disintegration of Steve Spurrier's career at Carolina. They were able to cobble together 7-6 in that 2014 season, and then the next year, Spurrier couldn't even get through it. He was not going to stick around for a losing season. So that's one of the reasons why I say this time of year, always fun, always interesting from a college football standpoint. But there are some years where it is just more fun to be around certain programs than others. And this one is way up there from the South Carolina standpoint. And if Spencer Rattler if he had not transferred in, I could not tell you that. It would not be to the level that it is. I think he specifically brings in so much potential for the offense. And we all know how an integral quarterback play is for offensive production. And how you just haven't seen it by and large from a Gamecock football team since that 2014 season, where Dylan Thompson and company, they put up a lot of yards and a lot of points. They just couldn't overcome a defense that had fallen off the map. So that's 8 years. And a long 8 years, man. And when Will Muschamp's in charge of your program from an offensive standpoint, it is a dark place to be. Then you had the Jake Bentley years, then the injury, and the Ryan Helensky true freshman kind of thrown to the wolves, and then how that situation kind of devolved. It has led us to here, where Luke Doty going in this time last year was the experienced guy, the guy you're putting all your hopes in, going into just the second year in the program, and a really talented guy, no doubt, but a first-year offensive coordinator, not a ton of weapons around him, especially nothing proven on the outside. Whew, it was bleak. And Rick Sanford had Carolina's first ever NFL first-round draft pick on last week. He put it very succinctly, said he was talking to Shane Beamer. Spring practice, like, how did you do it, man? How did you win 7 games without a quarterback? I'm guessing Shane Beamer didn't counter with, well, we actually had 4 quarterbacks who won games as starters, if you count Dakereon Joyner in that bowl game. DC, I'm learning, comes at this from a very realistic / non-optimistic outlook. I'm still thinking 6 wins, DC says, unless someone really stands out at running back. A Lattimore-type running back could boost that win total 2 or 3 more. Interesting. Because to me, it's not a running back deal. To me, that's more of an offensive line deal. Because I think those 3 guys that I mentioned, Juju McDowell, Marshawn Lloyd, Christian Beal-Smith, none of those guys are going to be confused with Marcus Lattimore unless Lloyd shows a tremendous amount of improved physical ability a year more removed off of the torn ACL. He's the only guy that could be a Marcus Lattimore type. And that, I think, is the highest compliment from a modern Gamecock football fan, right? Used to be a George Rogers guy. But it might be easy to forget, or especially if you only came to South Carolina football in the Steve Spurrier era, how consistently Gamecock football has had really good running backs. I mean, and not just good South Carolina running backs, but running backs that have gone on to the NFL. Harold Green was phenomenal. Deuce Staley, not too long after him. Brandon Bennett, you got to throw him in. Stanley Pritchard, they were really good guys in the Tannehill days. I mean, there have been really good running backs. Always loved Rob DeBoer back in the day. Ryan Brewer, tremendous running back, along with Squeaky Watson. Really talented guys have run the football in a South Carolina uniform. And by the way, after Marcus Lattimore, there was another really good running back in Mike Davis, and you could argue maybe a even more complete running back. Certainly a better home run threat, and Mike Davis still being in the NFL is a great example. Tyson Williams came through, has gotten run in the NFL. There have been guys. Brandon Wilds has got an NFL. He had a couple of years in the NFL on the resume. So I understand Marcus Lattimore was just a little bit different, a little bit more special, was on his way to being, I think Mel Kiper had him number 1 in the country for his running back big board, but before that first major injury, or maybe even after that one. Let's see what Roger says. In my opinion, the drop-off at Carolina started when the current head coach left to join his dad in Blacksburg. The recruiting immediately dropped off. Carolina fans are excited but realistic. 7 wins, I'll say. I understand what you're saying there, Roger. If you're going to go really big picture, but I think that's a little bit too big a picture for me. And I get it. Shane Beamer does deserve a bunch of credit, and Steve Spurrier Jr. did get a bunch of blame for the recruiting operation and where it went after Beamer left the day after Jadeveon Clowney committed to Carolina. And what was that, spring of 2011? But you can't have 3 straight top 10 seasons without continuing to recruit. Okay. So to say the drop off at Carolina started before you had 3 straight top 10 seasons, that's just not where the Carolina program is. Maybe you could do that at Southern Cal during the Pete Carroll era, or way back in the John Robinson heydays, or Notre Dame during their run, or something. But the history just isn't there. That doesn't quite work, in my opinion. I get where you're coming from, though, Roger. But if the recruiting immediately dropped off, you wouldn't be able to win 11 games 3 years in a row from there. Excited but realistic. I don't know. I mean, you always get more of some on both of those categories, right? Some are more excited and willing to go farther than others. Some are more realistic and reserved, and maybe more scarred or cautious. I think 7 regular season wins. You go 7-5. I think that's very fair. And I think that's kind of how I see things as well. I would say I'm kind of waffling between 6-6 and 7-5. It's that, to me, it is not a running back thing. I would put that so far down on my list of X factors. To me, let's not overthink it. It is quarterback number 1 for sure, and then times, it would be 1 through 5 for me as the X factor for the Gamecock season going. As where I get it, and I've lived it, and I've seen it, and man, poor Todd Ellis, poor Dylan Thompson. Those are the ones that stick out to me as guys who I thought were really good quarterbacks and got too much blame for losses. Now, maybe you look at the interception numbers now, all these years later, and you understand the Todd Ellis one. I understand it more than the Dylan Thompson one. The fact that Gamecock fans criticized Dylan Thompson in that 2014 season for some Gamecock losses where he couldn't continue to be a miracle worker in the final seconds after the Gamecock defense continues to give up touchdown after touchdown. That's the most unfair example from my standpoint about quarterbacks getting too much blame when your team doesn't win enough games, doesn't win a lot of games. But these past several years, you could start it with the Brandon McElwain, Will Muschamp era. You just haven't seen production at quarterback. And that was a Will Muschamp thing. Roger hitting us up historically and reminding me Kevin Long, Clarence Williams, just before George Rogers, both played in the NFL. I think both were over 1,000 yards one year at Carolina. Thank you, Roger. But Kevin White was a guy who wore number 6 for the Gamecocks back in the day, back in that Harold Green-ish era that gets a little fuzzy for me in the 80s. Just name popped up in my head, too. Another great running back. There have been some. There are really good guys, I think, on this roster, too. But as far as being the X factor, I think wide receiver I put above them. Tight end I put above running backs. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to make guys miss for sure. But I think those guys have enough of a proven track record, and transfer from Wake Forest and Bill Smith, especially having already done it for as many years as he has. I think Marshawn Lloyd showed enough in year number 1 coming off the knee injury, in my mind, to justify the recruiting hype that he had, but to also explain why he didn't have more production last year. And especially when you got other options in Kevin Harris, a proven guy coming off a 1,000-yard season in the SEC. When you had Zaquandre White and his ability and his just sheer energy and drive himself. I'd say last year running backs overachieved in a lot of ways. You need to have another good year there, but I'm kind of expecting that. I think that might be the safest bet. One of the safest bets from the offense this year, because I just don't know what kind of bet Spencer Rattler is, combined with Marcus Satterfield as his offensive coordinator, combined with wide receivers. Josh Van proved it last year after being a relative non-issue before that. Corey Rucker has proven he can be a pretty good wide receiver at Arkansas State. Antoine Wells, Juice Wells, has proven he was a really good wide receiver at James Madison. That's a little bit different than being a really good receiver at South Carolina. You still got other guys that have been around the Gamecock program, that have played for the Gamecocks out there, who just have not been able to do it at the level Carolina needs them to do it to take that next step. So you got all of those things going in, man. Makes it fascinating. This article from CBSSports.com was fascinating too. I mentioned it yesterday and said we'd talk about it a little bit more. But the idea that there's a company out there, and I mentioned the name yesterday. I don't even remember the name of it. This is an article on CBSSports.com that you can go check out. I believe it was written, if not yesterday, it was the day before, so it won't be too far down the list. But it's talking about name, image, and likeness offers being out there. The way this article is written is Dennis Dodd, national writer there for CBSSports.com, got to look in on a Zoom call of this company, and that has been doing it for a little while now. This company is connected with Fernando Tatis Jr., who randomly has come up on the show, right, with that big Juan Soto trade to the Padres. But basically, the company is investing in athletes. Now, college athletes, because you can, from a name, image, likeness standpoint, say, we're going to front you this much money. All we're requiring in return, this is your money. All we're requiring in return is a percentage of your future earnings. It's a fascinating idea that I never thought I would see pop up from a college football standpoint, but that's exactly what this article is talking about. The Zoom call that Dennis Dodd sat in on was for a Georgia linebacker. This company's already, I think it said maybe 8 guys across the SEC. 23 other offers are out there, I believe were the numbers. Makes me wonder if there's a South Carolina offer out there. Spencer Rattler would be at the top of that list, right? Maybe a guy like Marshawn Lloyd, or I don't know who else would be on the list. Zach Pickens, Jordan Birch, Cam Smith. Oh, I didn't even mention Cam Smith when talking about Gamecock football, which is, I think, a tremendous sign, again, about the optimism and enthusiasm and depth of this year's team and storylines and the whole deal, with him being actually probably projected a little bit higher from an future NFL draft standpoint than Jaheim Bell that I mentioned earlier, than Zach Pickens, and doing it from the very important position of cornerback on the outside in the SEC. So, yeah, if Cam Smith were on the list, it wouldn't be surprising to me, of a company willing to front a significant amount of money to a college athlete right now in exchange for a percentage of future earnings. Basically a hedge fund to some degree, and I don't really understand hedge funds, by the way, but an investment opportunity. A company willing to invest in people because they think that investment will pay off in the long run, especially with where professional sports contracts are these days. What have we talked about today? I think I just mentioned it a little bit and talked about it more yesterday. $700 to $800 million with the Live Series throughout the Tiger Woods. He's kind of in his own category, but having said that, we've already talked about $440 million for 15 years for Juan Soto was the offer from the Nationals. Contract that actually happened. Austin Riley, 10 years, $212 million, the biggest contract that the Braves have ever put out there. This is long gone are the days 20 years ago where A-Rod made headlines with a 10-year, $252 million deal, right? $250 million, richest at the time in professional sports. Now it was almost $500 million there for Juan Soto. It was $750 million for Tiger Woods just to make the switch to go play in less golf tournaments that he's played in with the PGA Tour. Crazy. So from a business standpoint, I get it. It only makes sense. Sounds like a new way to gamble, Troy says. I'd say this is a lot safer gambling than going to a casino for sure, or maybe even playing the stock market these days. Especially when you're talking about SEC guys. From the football standpoint, we've all seen the SEC numbers dwarfing other conferences, dominating. And especially at certain positions, right? You talk about DBs. I mean, you could go probably across the board. But this is a case where everybody would win, right? That especially guys in college who have come from disadvantaged backgrounds, if they were able to, I would assume that is probably the ideal client for for this company specifically, where that money might mean more, or certainly more security for their family than others in different family situations. Where, and again, it's one of the reasons why I think those of us on the pro name, image, and likeness, or players getting paid, players getting much more of a piece of the pie, have been so loud, is that you see players and their families going through the college experience being so valuable to a college football program and getting so little in return at the time. I mean, you see that so many times. I could only see it so many times without seeing it from that perspective. And then especially seeing the other side of it with the millions and millions of dollars that coaches were getting paid, just not right. And so I get it that you have to be very careful if you're a big time player, or you're a player in this position, right? When people are coming at you. And anytime you're looking at percentage of future earnings, man, that can be a massive amount of money that you're giving away. But I think I don't know how many of these guys, for a lot of these guys, this can be a really good thing. I would like to think this can be a best case scenario for everyone. If you got the money to give out there and improved lives immediately, that's a great thing. And then if it makes it worth your while on the back end, where guys are already getting paid an absurd amount of money, great. Good business model. Roger says, nothing to do with on the field stuff, but I saw where Shane Beamer took time out from his family vacation to support the Phil Petty family yesterday. I think things like this tell you what he's about, a total contrast with Must Chump, Roger says. Now, I hear what you're saying, Roger. I don't think it's a total contrast, and I think that's kind of exactly who Will Muschamp was in a lot of ways with his players. It was connecting with the fan base and maybe the larger picture of a football program as opposed to players and maybe former players didn't get in that circle. So maybe you're right on that one. And Phil Petty was never coached by Shane Beamer. He missed him by a good 5 years. I would say maybe even 6. I think 2007 is when Shane came to South Carolina. They probably crossed paths in the GA days or the very early days of Shane Beamer's coaching career. I think where I will agree with you on that one, Roger, is the awareness of the massive impact that a head coach can have with how he spends his time is where Shane Beamer is light years ahead of Will Muschamp. and where Will Muschamp never figured that out as a head coach, that you have to spend your time so much differently than a defensive coordinator. If you're going to be a head coach in the SEC anyway. And maybe not, maybe Nick Saban didn't have to do that, right? If you're going to be a head coach in the SEC and not have your teams perform consistently at the highest of levels. You gotta garner goodwill. You have to foster more relationships than others, maybe. And that's what this kind of comes down to, right? This putting out offers for future earnings. I read that and I think, oh man, that seems a little slimy. I don't like the sound of that. But the reality is that I do like guys improving their financial situation for them and their family while they're in college. The idea of that, being able to do that, is fantastic, and doing it completely above board, and everybody knows about it, and their numbers out there, and there's nothing shady about it, because we all know that players and their families at a certain spot at certain schools have always improved their lives financially and otherwise in multiple ways that were against NCAA rules. They just were. That happened. And so now the fact that you can do that without breaking rules, you can do that in a very clear business situation. I love the fact that guys are going to get schooled up about these opportunities, man. And the financial intelligence / maturity that you're going to need to develop, that you do need to develop right now earlier than ever, I think is just going to be a benefit for a relationship, a dynamic that has been really skewed against players in a lot of ways, right? Agents and managers and hangers on have been able to take advantage and still do. And I'm sure probably in this situation will as well. I mean, who knows, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you might hear about a terrible deal for an athlete where they got, I don't know, let's make up some numbers, right? 10 grand, but they gave away 10% of their future earnings. Now, I would think you would have to get a lot more than that, and you would want to give away less than that for sure. But maybe those type of loan shark deals are out there, and we'll be thinking of it 10 years from now as this company specifically, or other companies like it, just being loan sharks and completely ripping off players and making unfair deals and the whole thing. But I'm hopeful, especially now that schools can kind of step in and broker these deals in a lot of ways, that there will be enough education out there to say, hey, all right, understand, yes, you will get this sum of money, and that is more than maybe anybody in your family has ever seen. But you might also be giving up this much larger sum of money, and maybe we can figure out another way. Maybe we can figure out a better deal, a better situation for you and your family right now, that you don't have to give away the treasure chest, the pot of gold that you will have earned down the line. Just a fascinating place to be as we sit here on August 3rd, 2022. Man, just going through the Gamecock storylines, or how I perceive Gamecock football headed into preseason practice, was fun for me, man. Talking about those positions and the idea of what might happen here in the next few weeks on the field in preseason practice, but where the Gamecock offense could go specifically, where Spencer Rattler could take an offense that just wasn't very good last year and improve things. What can happen, what will happen on the defensive side of the ball in year number 2 with Clayton White, man. It's going to be fun. Fun to continue to talk about, keep tabs on for sure, Appreciate you guys being a part of the program. Roger, DC, Troy, most recently weighing in. Especially thank you guys for participating on the live stream each and every day, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. Not going to have a Friday show this week again. One last little beach weekend for the family before school starts and helping to celebrate my sister's 40th birthday. I know a lot of you, Shane Beamer himself, as Roger just mentioned, taking a little bit of time away from his family, working in the last family time at the end of the summer here. That's a lot of where we're at. And so extra appreciation for you checking out this program. You can always go and check out the YouTube channel, and we've got some show segments separated there for you in smaller pieces than the 2-hour chunk of each and every live show here. But however you do it, again, much appreciated. Thanks for checking us out. That'll do it for this edition of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.